Hi everyone, welcome to your bonus lesson. This is actually a lesson from my How to Draw Faces Workbook 2.0. So I hope that you enjoy, and I'll be talking about how you can join that course a little bit later. Go ahead and print out the reference photo so we can get started. So we're going to start with a straight line down the middle of the face, then we'll draw our oval. And then in the middle here, we will find our eye line. And then after that, we'll put a line above that for the eyebrows. And then in between the eyebrow and the chin falls the nose. So you'll remember that from our placement practice. And then comes the bottom lip in between the nose and the chin. Let's go ahead and draw the neck in, and just keep in mind that you can always adjust this as we go along. If it's kind of too thick or too thin, you can adjust as we go along. We are going to start with the nose. I like to make a circle for the middle and then 2 circles to form the nostrils. And just keep in mind that that middle circle will dip down lower than the 2 sides in this particular face. The next thing we can do is start on our lips. So I'm going to start with our top lip and then fill that in and then go to her bottom lip. And I'm just making fairly light lines to connect these 2 lips. Now her chin felt a bit small when I made a little circle down here, and so I'm just going to extend her jaw just a tiny bit, just so that she has enough room down there. Okay, so let's see where our eyes are going to go. So I'm going to go over to the photo and just make a line straight up and see where her eyes are going to land, and hers are landing pretty much on that inner corner of the eye. So I'm going to make a line up the side of the nose on each side, and then I can draw in her eyes. Now we need to see how big the eyes are going to be. So in order to kind of keep them in proportion, I'm going to measure in between the nostrils and then measure on the left side and then the right side. And you can see on the photo that she doesn't have a full eyes length on the sides of her face. It's kind of like a half. So I'm just making sure that I leave enough space on either side of her face for like contouring and all that good stuff. Now we can shape the eyebrows and go ahead and put those in, and you can also draw another line and see where exactly those land. And it looks like they're right on top of the nostrils. And just use your creative judgment. If you feel like the eyebrows are coming in too close, you can give some room, and so that will keep the eyes separated. It won't look like, you know, just one big cyclops. Now I feel like her forehead is a bit small, and part of that is because the sides of her head, her forehead, are rounded. So I'm going to kind of square it off a bit. So I'm just erasing kind of the corners. I can still kind of see my old pencil lines, and I'm going to open up that forehead. So now you can see the difference between how it was looking like an egg before, and now it looks like a really nice curved forehead. Another thing we're going to do is draw a line from the outer corner of her eye and make sure we have enough of her cheek. We just want to make sure that we're not cutting off a part of her face. By drawing this line, it'll also give you a good idea of the thickness of her neck. Is it tapered in more, or is it just goes kind of straight down? Everyone's neck is different, so you're able with these lines to kind of really figure that out. We can go ahead and draw in her ears. So if you look, her ear, like the top of her ear, falls between her eyebrow and her eyelid. And then the bottom of the ear falls right underneath her nose. So you can kind of sketch in a light line and draw those ears in. And make sure you're drawing on your reference photo so that you can keep that for the future. And so you'll just get into the practice of making marks and lines on your reference photo to keep yourself on track. Now, once I put her ears in, her head was looking a little weird. So what I'm doing now is just making sure that her head is divided into thirds. But that does not include the forehead. So from the bottom of the nose to the chin should be a third, and then from the nose to the middle of the eyebrows a third, and then from the eyebrows to the forehead line should be another third. And you should have some space left over at the very top for her hair, and it's essentially where her brains are. So you just want to make sure that you have room for everything. So I've extended that line, made her forehead line, and now we are good to go. Her ears don't seem to take over her whole head. So now our placement is done. It really only took us about 5 or 6 minutes to make sure that everything was where we wanted it to be. And now you can start erasing those lines and cleaning up your drawing. At this point, we can start to really form all of our features. And so everything we've learned in our practice studies of drawing the lips and the nose and the eyes, we can kind of put into practice here. So the first thing we need to do is just make sure that her lips are correct. I feel like the right side of her lip is a little short, so I'm drawing a line from the corner of her lip all the way up just to make sure that I've got enough there. And you can see the left side was longer than the right side. So I'm going to extend that out. You may not have that issue, but I just wanted to show you how I made that correction. I'm actually erasing out the corners of her lips because she's smiling in the photo and I want her to kind of have that same expression. So just a little bit of tilt upward in the corners of the mouth can really make a huge difference and make her look kind of happy as opposed to just, straight faced. Now that we've used those lines, we can go ahead and erase those out and then work on the nose. We really need to form the sides of her nose and kind of pull the middle of the nose down a bit because I can see that that middle portion is kind of curved down. So now you see that just making that really simple line, the nose looks more like hers. And then after that, we can just go into our shading. And just like in our shading practice, look for the obvious dark areas. I know that this photo does not have a ton of shading and we won't have to do too much, but a little goes a long way when you're working with simple shadows. So on that inner corner of her eye, we have some shadows there, so I'm just going to just lightly run my pencil across those areas to start that first layer of shading. Next we have the eyelids. That's another area that gets pretty dark, that crease of the eye, and you can remember from our eye studies we did that a lot of shadows will be in that area. I'm going to put in some of her eyelashes, and then I'm going to move to her nose to do some of the shadows there. She has a shadow falling on the left side underneath her nose and then right underneath the middle. And you can also kind of darken up her nostrils as well. Once you are done lightly shading her nose, then we can move on to her eyebrows. I'm making sure to move my pencil in the direction that her hairs are growing so that it gives it more of a realistic look. Another thing I'm doing is adjusting the pressure as I go through her eyebrows. It's not going to be all dark or all light. It's going to be varied, and that also will help make it look more realistic. Whenever you look at her lips, there's not like heavy shadows there, so I'm just going to take advantage of where I see some shadow. So the corners of her mouth and in between where her lips meet are going to be where I'm going to take that chance to put in some shadows. We can take some time and work on her eyes. Let's go ahead and draw in her pupils. So I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about eyes. My freehand eyes are not really the same. Like whenever I draw eyes, they're not perfectly symmetrical. And I've come to embrace that. I know a lot of artists have different tips and tricks. One thing you can do is have a certain way that you draw the eyes, a fixed routine so that they pretty much come out the same. But even if you look at her eyes, the left eye is a bit more slanted than the right. So to me, I embrace the imperfections. One thing you can do is use a T-square ruler, which I will do sometimes, and make sure that my eyes are level and that my pupils are hitting the same spot, because that will really throw off your drawing. Like if the eyes are not level, if the pupils are off, if the iris is off, that can really make your drawing look kind of wonky. So using a ruler can really help. But otherwise, I just kind of go with the flow, do the best that I can, and I just kind of move on, because by the time that it's all said and done, a lot of the times you really can't tell, and your eye kind of fixes all the problems that your drawing has as a whole, I think. So after I put in the shading for the eyes, you can see I'm using my ruler. I'm just making sure each of the eyes are hitting at the same spot on the bottom and the top, so that I don't have that shifty wonkiness that I know some people are worried about. So at this point, I'm putting more pressure onto my pencil, and I'm going to darken up those areas around her eyes. Once you start going back to that second layer, you can really see your drawing start to come to life. Now that I've added those really nice darks, you can see her features kind of pop. Here I wanted to add some more shadow underneath her nose, but I went a bit dark and it doesn't look right. It doesn't really match the darkness on the reference photo. It kind of looks like she is just a weird mole or something. So I'm going to take that out and just use a lighter hand as I'm trying to create that shadow. So now I'm just going to move around my drawing and see what needs to be darkened up. And I wanted to add some lashes to her bottom line and just put a bit more shading into her eyebrows. And I'm not darkening up the whole thing, I'm just picking certain areas to kind of darken up and call your attention to. I had walked away from my drawing, and when I came back, I felt like I needed to readdress her pupils. They were kind of a weird shape, and they were a little bit bigger than I wanted. So I made them just a tiny bit smaller, and I changed some of the shading inside of them, and I felt like that was a bit better than what I had before. So one thing you can do is just take a quick break, walk away from your drawing or take a photo and look at it and kind of analyze where you are as far as if you like it, if you want to change, or if you want to change something. So we can continue to darken up different areas of her face that need addressing. You can go back to her nose or her lips and just make those areas a bit darker. And just remember, when you're adding the darkest tones, less is more. And you'll see that for yourself when you start to add that in. You don't need a lot of the darker values to really make things stand out. We can just move down to the neck and lightly sketch in a few of the shadows down there. I am making these areas pretty light as I want most of the focus to be on her face and hair. We are going to go ahead and start on her hair, and I'm going to show you how I like to build up the hair. The first thing I want to do is create the overall shape. So I'm just making a few curvy lines, squiggly lines. I'm trying to make them as random as I can so that her hair looks, or it doesn't look uniform. Again, since this is our first layer, you can make this layer a bit light as you're sketching in her hair, and then of course we'll darken it up as we move along. So in this case, I'm not doing individual strands. I'm trying to clump the hair together, and then later I can add little pieces here and there, but for the most part, I like to group things together. I'm just gonna work my way up towards the top, and this is kind of the area that's covered up by her hands. Now we won't be putting her arms in, so I'm just going to make her hair at the top look like it's kind of pulled together. Now that the overall shape is in, we can go ahead and erase the line we used to draw her head, and it'll start to make more sense once you take that line out. In order to build up the texture and values in her hair, we are going to be doing hatching marks. Now, parallel hatching is when you just make your lines close to one another and they're just kind of lined up. And what I like to do is make them a little bit larger, close to the base of the neck, and then they'll go smaller as it tapers off to the curls. So you'll see here that I'm just making my lines close to one another. They're not overlapping too much, but this helps to really quickly build up your shadow and your texture. I'm also keeping the direction of the line the same so that it all looks uniform across her hair. Alright, so now that this first layer is done, what I like to do is go back with my curly, squiggly lines and just add a few more of those here and there. And this will help to reinforce that curliness back into the hair because we put a lot of straight lines in, so we want to bring that curl back. Now we can add another layer, and what you could do is do cross hatching, where you go in the opposite direction of the line you previously made, but I like to just add another layer on top of what I did and add more curls as I go along. So that's kind of what I like to do. You can feel free to experiment and see what feels right or what looks cool to you. So as you're putting down the second layer for the hair, make sure you're looking back at your reference photo so you can see where those darker shadows are. It looks as though she's backlit, so a lot of those dark areas will be around her face. So just apply more pressure and get those darker values down. As I'm going along, I'm going to also darken up the curly lines too, so that they don't get lost. As you're learning to draw faces, I would like to encourage you to be experimental, and I want you to kind of protect that because it's going to help you to keep going. I would look at my favorite artist on Instagram or online somewhere, and I would look at all their work and it just looks so great, and I couldn't understand what they were doing that I wasn't doing, and the only difference between me and them was just practice. And the more that I drew, the better that my drawings came out. I mean, you have to put that practice in so that you can get the results and so that you can build a body of work. I think in 2017 I probably did about 50 faces because I was determined to get better. And so I want to encourage you to just keep practicing. You don't have to share every single drawing you make, but I do want you to keep a record. Whenever you do a sketch, make sure you date it and kind of write something down about how you were feeling that day, because then you can go back and see your progress. Also keep in mind that once you start comparing yourself to other people and take your eyes off of your own lane, that's when you get into trouble. And I've been there and I still go there sometimes, but for the most part, I've learned to kind of zone out and, stay in my own lane. So that's kind of my pep talk for you all. I feel like drawing is physical, it is the practice, but it's also mindset as well. So please protect those thoughts as you're in your journey. I'm going to go back in for one more layer to see if I can get it just a tad bit darker. I feel like I used quite a bit of dark pencil lines in her eyes, and so I want to match that with her hair. So I'm just going to go back one more time and go over just a few areas. And it's going to be pretty dark by her face, and then I'll let that fade out as it goes to the tips of her hair. So that about does it for this lesson. I want to thank you so much for joining me for this 5-day face drawing challenge. I really love seeing all of your work and all of your practice and just all the hard work that you're putting into it. Just please trust me that it will pay off. And you will start to see results immediately. Like as you're drawing on your own, you will definitely start to see your progress. I would love to invite you to a new course I've created called How to Draw Faces Workbook 2.0, and it's filled with classes like this one, as well as printables and videos like the ones we've taken over this past week. If you need more practice with eyes and noses and lips, I really want to encourage you to hop on over and join the course. It's about 4 weeks worth of really drilling down placement, drawing, shading, proportions, all that good stuff. So I hope to see you over there. Thanks so much for joining me and have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time. Bye.